Hi everyone, this is Andrew Prima, Ukrainian American, reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 111 of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this is the second week of April 2024. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about how Russia destroyed the largest thermal power plant in Ukraine, Russia proposes a peace plan through Turkey, and how NATO started changing its position toward the war in Ukraine. A massive attack destroyed one of Ukraine's largest power plants in Ukraine. Air Defense Forces of Ukraine shut down 57 air targets out of 82, including 18 missiles and 39 drones. The report of intelligence suggests that the new missile presents an even greater threat to Ukraine than Kinjal supersonic air ballistics missiles launched from Jet's MiG 31 aircraft. The April 11 attack reflects KH 69's ability to bypass what seems to be depleted Ukrainian air defense. The use of KH-69, particularly launched from the jets Su-34 and Su-35, could become more prevalent due to the higher number of those aircraft Moscow has at its disposal. The Tripilska plant, which was the biggest energy supplier for the Kiev, Cherkasy, and Zhytomyr regions, was struck numerous times, destroying the transformers, turbines, and generators and leaving the plant ablaze. As the first drone approached, workers hid in shelter, saving their lives, said Andriy Gota, which is a chairman of a supervisory board of the state company that runs the plant. The Tripilska thermal power plant is the most powerful power plant in the Kiev region and one of the largest in Ukraine. Before the strike, the plant supplied 55% of electricity to the Kiev region. Speaking in Moscow, Russian terrorist Putin cast the attacks on Ukraine energy facilities as a response to Ukrainian strikes that targeted Russian oil refineries. The Tripilska plant supplied electricity to 3 million customers, but no one lost power because the grid could compensate for the low demand at this time of the year. Can you imagine if they did that during the winter? It seems like, in this case, three regions would have been covered in dark. Still, the consequences of the strikes could be felt in the coming months as the air conditioning use ramps up with the summer. At least 10 other strikes overnight damaged energy infrastructure in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said more than 200,000 people in the region, which has been struck repeatedly, were without power. Ukraine's largest private energy operator, DTEK, described the numerous strikes as one of the most powerful attacks this year. Energy Minister Herman Halushenko told reporters it was the large scale, enormous missile attack that affected our energy sector very badly. Russia has recently renewed strikes on Ukraine energy facilities, and attacks last month blacked out large parts of the country, a level of darkness not seen since the first day of the full scale invasion in 2022. The volume and accuracy of the attacks have alarmed the country's defenders and left officials scrambling for better ways to protect energy assets. The strikes have also tested Ukraine's ability to make quick repairs. So the terrorist state has so far failed to break Ukraine on the battlefield, but now there is a very real chance that the lack of air defense will enable the Kremlin to achieve its goals. Ukraine's search for Patriot air defense system is taking place against Russia's escalating air offensive, which is benefiting from a month long decline in military support from the West and a long deadlock in the US Congress over allocating a large aid package to Ukraine. While breaches in Ukraine's air defense systems are increasing, and individual air defense units are forced to use their dwindling resources more and more sparingly. Russia has conducted a series of night attacks in recent weeks that have disabled much of Ukraine's power system. The second largest city of Ukraine and the former capital, Kharkiv, was particularly badly affected. Located just a few tens of kilometers from the border with Russia in eastern Ukraine, this city has been under intense shelling since mid March of this year, which has caused extensive damage to residential areas and civilian infrastructure. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left without electricity for a long time in recent weeks. The destruction in Kharkiv was so severe that some analysts now believe Russia's goal is to clear the city of more than a million residents ahead of an expected summer offensive by Russian forces. The Kremlin wants to make Ukraine's second city unlivable. With each new Russian shelling, which destroys more and more objects of the civilian infrastructure of Ukraine, there is a growing feeling that there is a less and less time left to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe in the country. If Ukraine doesn't urgently receive additional air defense systems and ammunition, then the entire region may soon face a rapid deterioration of the situation, losing access to electricity and other basic services. This could lead to a new refugee crisis when millions of Ukrainians will start entering European Union. Destroying the country's energy system would also cause economic chaos and significantly undermine Ukraine's military efforts. This will create the conditions for a military victory for Russia, which will have catastrophic consequences both for Ukraine itself and for the future of international security. Russia has so far failed to crack Ukraine on the battlefield, but now there is a very real chance that the lack of air defense systems will allow the Kremlin to achieve its goals by targeting Ukraine's increasingly vulnerable civilian infrastructure. So recently, there were rumors, and there is several media companies posted a peace deal proposed by Turkey. Is it a real Turkey? Peace plan from Erdogan looks like the peace from Vladimir Putin. On April 11, several media platforms published the content of the peace plan to end the war in Ukraine, which was allegedly promoted by Turkey. Naturally, this publication only fueled rumors and other conspiracies about alleged secret negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. So, let's talk about this peace plan and what it actually proposes. Because we know Russia uses its propaganda sources just to plant a little seed of a peace deal, which the country who is being constantly shelled might agree on. But most likely he is mistaken. So, what is a peace plan? The mutual commitments of the United States and Russia not to use nuclear weapons under any conditions, as well as the restoration of the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, and with this impossibility of unilateral withdrawal from it in the future. Another point, prohibition of interference in the internal affairs of another country in any way that might cause destabilization of its government. Another point, freezing the war along the existing front line as of today. Another one, commitment to hold a referendum in 2040, all Ukrainian, on the country's foreign policy course, as well as a referendum under international control on all Ukrainian territories annexed by Russia at the time of the war freeze. Guarantees of Ukraine's not aligned status until 2040. Exchange of captives according to the formula all for all, and Russia doesn't object. Ukraine join the European Union. Look, I doubt that this exactly Erdogan's peace plan, as some publications have written, although Turkey certainly appears in the scenarios for its promotion. What are my doubts actually, and who might be the author of the plan? If actually it was Erdogan's peace plan, it would be logical that the Turkish president himself presented it officially and publicly instead of organizing a shutdown in opposition Russian publication. In extreme cases, such a drain would be organized by Turkish publication close to Erdogan or his party. And since the leak of the peace plan appeared in a Russian opposition publication with reference to unnamed source, then this unnamed source is most likely of Russian origin and has some relations to Turkey in negotiations on ending the war. For the completeness of this picture, I would say I will quote that the article through the newspaper, the New Gazette Europe, the source claims that all three parties currently have the text of the document, that is Turkey, Russia, and Ukraine. The project is based on the documents of the first negotiations in Istanbul, and part of the wording of May 2022 was included in the new text. How realistic is the peace plan? The article in this publication, Novaya Gazeta Europe, expresses skepticism. It claims that the probability of the adoption of this draft agreement remains low since it is at least the ninth project of this kind. I'm even more skeptical about this peace plan, but for other reasons. Russia is currently preparing for an offensive and focusing Ukraine to its peace conditions, which do not include compromise options but a complete and categorical ban on the possibility of Ukraine's membership in NATO and the demilitarization of Ukraine, which will practically deprive us of our independent defense capability. Ukraine, in turn, will probably be skeptical about the subject of referendums in the occupied territories. As you know, Russia never ran honest referendums. All these referendums are just a fig leaf to cover up, and then the full international legalization of the annexation of the occupied territories, which has already taken place. Therefore, this peace plan should not be taken too seriously. But this topic of freezing the war, especially because of the current and potential situation in the Ukrainian energy sector, will surely be considered after some time. The problem, however, is how and with what to pressure the Russians so that they stop the systematic destruction of Ukraine energy and agree to a freeze, which is now visually necessary for us, not for Kremlin. There are only two recipes for solving this issue: the maximum possible supply of air defense systems and aviation to Ukraine. Regarding this point, unfortunately, there are great doubts and a warning from the United States and other Western countries about the supply of long range missiles to Ukraine, which will be used for strikes on Russian energy and infrastructure facilities if Russia doesn't stop its strikes on Ukraine energy infrastructure. Well, the good news that the meeting of foreign ministers of NATO countries, which took place in Brussels on April 3 and 4, alarmed many Russian experts. An unexpected surge in the activity of the NATO in its 75th year of existence refuted all Russian stereotypes about the alliance. Moscow presents NATO as a disjoint, aggressive, and indecisive structure tightly controlled by the United States. However, the meeting of NATO countries' foreign ministers, which took place in Brussels, alarmed many Russian experts as the participating countries demonstrated their determination to strengthen their solidarity. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has proposed creating a fund of 100 billion euros, which is approximately $108 billion, to support Ukraine over the next 5 years. The move surprised Moscow and led Russian state media to quickly highlight any sign of doubt among NATO members, although it is unclear whether this initiative enjoys anonymous support. There is no doubt that there is a broad support for expanding Western military aid to Ukraine. Most recent proposals to strengthen military ties have come from smaller European players such as Prague and Copenhagen. Stoltenberg's proposal to transfer control of the contact group on Ukraine's defense to NATO is interpreted in Moscow as another sign of weakening US leadership. Mainstream analysis suggests that Europeans are desperately trying to prepare for possible changing of the guard after the US presidential election in November, which the Kremlin is eagerly anticipating. Few advocates say that Donald Trump's re-election won't help Russia's cause, especially if Congress approves a long overdue aid package for Ukraine by the end of this month. Russian experts draw attention to the new quality of the consolidation of NATO European pillars, supported by a significant increase in military investments. France is trying to position itself as a champion of European assertiveness in the field of security, and Russian propaganda discusses with a great disdain the ambitions of the French President Emmanuel Macron. While French farmers and pensioners may have a very different aspirations, the need for leadership in Europe is real. Due to constant strife in Germany's coalition government, the leader's position remained vacant. One of the manifestations of France's claims to leadership was a telephone conversation on April 3rd between the Minister of Defense Sebastien Lecornu and his Russian counterpart Sergei Shoigu. They discussed the possibilities of cooperation in the field of combating terrorism after the terrorist attack in Moscow last month. Russian General Shoigu insisted on the accusations focusing on the Ukrainians' trail and the support of Ukraine by Western special services. This lie, delivered in a threatening tone, hardly leaves room for the supposed cooperation. Moscow confirmation of its readiness to talk about the ending the war in Ukraine only on its terms did little to contribute to a productive dialogue. The combination of willingness to raise the stakes in support of Ukraine and reopen lines of communication with the Russian high command adds credibility to France's leadership in support of Kiev. Russia has no convincing counter to this investment based strategy. Her attempts to achieve tactical success on the battlefield, as before, lead to heavy losses. Thus, the Kremlin propaganda, which predicts a certain victory, cannot dispel fears about a gradual change in the balance of opportunities. The only recommendation that Moscow experts can formulate is to strengthen deterrence potential by demonstrating readiness to resort to Russia's nuclear power. Paris is well suited to counter the Kremlin's nuclear blackmail and has already begun consultations with European allies about the relevance of Europe's nuclear umbrella. The prospect of NATO refusing to send an official invitation to Ukraine to join the alliance at the upcoming July summit in Washington is playing out in Russia's political discourse. It takes a fair amount of geopolitical imagination to create a European security framework in which Ukraine acts as a buffer between an expanding Russia and hostile but inherently divided West. However, the complex political work on solving the problems of Kyiv's economic integration with the European Union and providing adequate security guarantees is progressing. So the long war creates numerous risks for Ukraine, and the Western coalition. Russia's looming summer offensive and potential nuclear escalation points to the need for the more concerned collective action to ensure that former is defeated and the latter contained. Many Europeans feel uneasy at the mention of the concept of the pre war period, as British Defense Minister Grant Shapps has warned. NATO can move forward in this work only by removing doubts and overcoming differences. This is part of democratic process, something that Putin's countries and propagandists seems to be unable to understand. What they portray as the weakness of surrendering West is actually a source of new energy. At the same time, Russia's declared determination to unite under Putin's leadership can hardly mask the deepening dysfunctionality of Putin's regime. Every state NATO takes to modernize its institutions and capabilities cause spasms of anxiety in the Kremlin, which thrives on suspicion rather than understanding the depth of the problems Russia faces. Exaggerating Western disunity has become a means of denying these problems, just as emphasizing friendliness toward the Arab world is a means of denying the roots caused by Islamist radicalism in Russia. The apparent failure to solve the problems of brutal exploitation of migrant workers from Central Asia creates fertile grounds for new terrorist attacks. Refusal to assess the degradation of its military machine is leading Russia to defeat in the war that itself has unleashed. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share it with your friends.